First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. Really appreciate that you have chosen to spend time with us this evening. Very conscious it's Tech Week here in New York, and that's one of the reasons why we're in town. But you do have a lot of options in terms of how you can spend your evening. There's so many different events on. So we do appreciate you being here today. My name is Declan Ivory. I'm VP of Customer Support at Fin. I've been involved in customer support for close on 4 decades, so I've seen a lot of changes, but quite literally, I haven't seen anything like the changes that we have seen over the last few years, and hopefully we'll touch on some of that as we go through the conversation this evening. A little bit about Fin, in case you don't know who Fin is. So Fin has been around for 15 years. We recently rebranded from Intercom to Fin, and the main reason we did that, we had been building customer service solutions for our entire history. But over the last 3 years, we very much focused on building Fin as a customer agent, initially focused on customer service and customer support, but more recently focused on the entire customer lifecycle or the entire customer journey. So given the focus and the investment we had in Fin, we decided to rebrand the company as Fin. So that's who we are. We're Irish founded. We've been around for 15 years. Customer service was our heritage. AI and Fin as a customer agent is where our future is. I'm delighted that we have George Dilthey from Clay with us this evening, because when you think about where AI is going, lots of people have dabbled with using AI for customer support. Some people have deployed it very deeply for customer support. But those that are really kind of forging ahead are thinking more critically around how can you use AI to actually build a connected customer experience. So looking at the entire customer journey and looking beyond the roles that we tend to think about when we talk about using an AI agent, and more looking at it through the lens of the customer. What is the actual customer experience? And I'm delighted to say that Clay have been at the forefront of thinking in this way and have really been looking at how they can build a connected customer experience using AI. So George, I'd love if you maybe would give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, a little bit about how did you land at Clay, what's your history? And also a little bit about Clay for those who may not have heard about Clay or may not know fully what Clay do, because it's a pretty cool company with some really cool technology. So I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Declan. So I'm George. I run the support team at Clay. And Clay, you can sort of think of it as your sort of all-in-one go-to-market platform for research and outreach for your customers. So you can tap into one of 150 plus data providers, find your best customers, enrich them, and then sort of action on that data through emails or ads or CRM enrichment, whatever it might be. So I've been at Clay for a little over 2 years now. So it was March of 2024. I actually started as a go-to-market engineer, but was only there for about a month before I took over the support team. And we were 2 or so people, and we are now a global team of 30 or so. We just opened up an office in San Francisco, and we just opened up an office in London. I also have someone out in Japan. So a pretty sprawling team now, which is very fun. And before Clay, I was at a small startup called Mutiny. And before that, I actually worked in the arts world. So I worked at Lincoln Center here in New York City, and at a couple agencies doing a mix of marketing and web analytics and that kind of stuff. So super excited to be here.
Thanks, George. I mean, it's great to get insight on your history and what Clay is doing as a business. And obviously, as I said, it's a pretty cool business. Support is obviously critical for you guys. I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey from a support point of view and using AI. And I know we've had lots of conversations about this over the last few years. We've never had it in front of a live audience quite this size before, so no pressure. But what was the main driver for Clay to really think critically around using AI for support as kind of the initial focus?
Yeah, I think the initial focus sort of came, it was sort of a forcing function of the fact of how we sort of wanted to run our support team. So from very early on, when I took over the team, I had a conversation with our founders, Varun and Kareem, and all the way from the top down, we always decided that we wanted support to be more than just a cost center. We didn't want it to be, just this afterthought that just had to exist as a good enough function. We wanted it to be really good and full of, really smart technical people, and we wanted to invest in it. And what sort of came very quickly after that is we realized that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in the support queue is not that. It's things like I forgot my password or I want a refund or whatever it might be. And so from very early on, we decided that we needed AI to sort of help us build the team that we wanted, so that the humans on our team can be more focused on the more strategic sort of engaging questions and almost acting as consultants, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, rather than answering the forgot password. And so pretty early on in my time, we ended up engaging with Finn, and we've been using it ever since.
I mean, you've also taken what I think is quite an unusual approach. You've made some decisions that, probably at the time did seem unusual, now are beginning to kind of make more sense to people. And one was establishing this role of GTM engineer. And I think you guys have been credited with almost creating that role, and other companies have emulated what you've done. And also having this concept of a support engineering team within your CX function as well. Love to, for you to talk a little bit about that and what impact that has had on your whole AI strategy.
Yeah, for sure. So I think they all sort of speak around this same sort of idea that we're getting at, is that all of these roles are becoming a little bit more technical, right? So the go-to-market engineer is sort of Clay's take on a salesperson, but they are a little bit more technical. They're sort of like a product-minded account executive. You can think of them, and so they're not just selling you a product. They also know how to build in Clay and how to use Clay and help our customers. And I think we have sort of embodied that across the organization. So we have our ops team, which is sort of a central place for a lot of our operations that help us, drive a lot of the plays that we want to do across our go-to-market team. We also have support engineers, which are, support folks that are sitting on the support team, but they're sort of engaging with the engineering team on our bugs and helping fix those. And so it's sort of this, being able to sort of bring a different level of technicality to all of these roles that we historically may not have been as technical.
And that role is quite new. When you evolved, it has come a little bit more commonplace. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest single impact of that role for Clay?
Yeah, I think for the support engineer in general, I mean, the biggest impact has been they've been sort of like an escalation point for the rest of the support team, which has been really helpful. I think Clay in general is a little bit more of a technical product than other products, and the support engineers sort of help us bridge that gap with the engineering base and be able to sort of have a really good relationship with the engineers to help us fix the things that are broken, but then also sort of be a conduit for product feedback or whatever it might be to build the next best thing. So it's helped build a really close relationship with EPD across the board.
Love to tease through, as you went on that journey of using AI to really, as you say, transform how you were delivering support and move from that cost center to a value center. Are there things about AI that surprise you, either good or bad?
Yeah, I think the thing that's still surprising me to this day is how you sort of, we're going to talk a little bit about this, but what sort of surprised me when we first got into it was the differentiators are different than what I had originally thought. So before we sort of engaged with Finn, we were looking at a couple of different companies, and part of me thought one of them is just going to be that much better than the other one. And what we sort of realized is the sort of AI models are all the same, and so that's actually not a differentiator in itself. What matters is the product behind what they're building, or the content that we have, which at that point was not that good. And so it sort of very quickly became clear to me that what you sort of originally thought was maybe this model is going to be better than this model just at baseline was actually more around the sort of internal products, how you build these things, how you orchestrate these things, and all of that. And I think that's continuing to be a sort of surprise for me.
Very good. I mean, it's interesting. Our own journey at Finn has kind of mirrored quite a lot of your own journey at Clay, because again, we had this kind of real conviction. We wanted to turn from being a cost center into being a value driver for the business, and that was one of the key focus points we had when we adopted Finn. And obviously, we had the advantage of working for Finn. Adopting Finn was almost like a non-negotiable. We had to do it, but it was actually something that I was really excited to get behind, because as I mentioned, I have a long history in customer service, and for many years, in fact, close on a decade at this stage, I always had this conviction that AI would be able to transform how you deal with your customers, and what the job of a support engineer is like as well will be transformed with AI. So having the opportunity to be an early adopter of Finn was really exciting from that point of view. So it was part around transformation to a value driver. It was also around the scaling, similar challenge you had. Like we were beginning to ship a new product, new capability at a very fast pace as a business. We were adding a lot of customers. And just being able to scale then in a much more manageable way because of Fin was a really, really big win for us. And then also transforming what we call our standard support policy. Like, so we are quite constrained in what we could do for customers. We weren't offering 24/7 support prior to Fin. And all of a sudden with Fin, we could build out that capability. And to the point you made, you're actually then using your humans in a much better way to interact with your customers and actually, deliver a lot more value, including in our case, we do what we call now consultative support, which is actually being a lot more proactive with our customers and actually seeing how we can get them to use the product at a deeper level, which is allowing them to get more value out of it. I think that's similar to the philosophy you have in Clay.
For sure. Yeah, it's a much better, it's more enjoyable for our team too, right? They're spending their time. We've actually seen like handle times go up, and anecdotally, everyone's sort of talking to us about how it's taking me longer to answer the questions that I have in the queue, and that's a positive signal for me because it means that they're not spending their time telling the 15th person how to what a credit is or whatever it might be.
I remember we had a conversation quite a while back at this stage, but you actually said, look at most organizations are trying to drive up first contact rate or first contact resolution, and you basically said I want to drive it down.
Right, because anything that can be solved in one contact is probably something that AI should be handling. And so historically we used to use that as a proxy for quality, and now we're flipping that on its head and saying if it's solved in one response, then we probably want to figure out how to do that with AI.
Yeah, and again, that really brought home to me that the metrics that you traditionally look at in this world, they really are turned on their head, and you really need to think about them differently. So it's fascinating even from that perspective.
Yeah.
But obviously, what we want to try and tease through this evening is like moving beyond support, because I think this is where the organizations that are really getting the most value out of AI are really setting the pace. They're understanding that AI can be applied across the entire customer journey, and like we use this term of connected customer experience. Some people talk about roles being blurred or roles being dissolved, or Des Traynor, one of our own founders, talks about AI being a convergent force across different roles. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about how that has kind of happened at Clay. And I think you used the term qualify everywhere, which is actually qualifying your customers at every single touch point. Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So qualify everywhere was sort of this idea that I threw into Slack one day, that essentially, when I think about qualification, or when I had thought about qualification, it always sort of was qualifying people on the form, on the website, when they were sort of a new customer kind of thing. That was always sort of the use case of qualification. And what I sort of realized through our support work is that there's actually opportunities to qualify everybody, and there's opportunities to qualify them at different points within their sort of customer journey, right? And so what we started to do was open up, we sort of use Clay to sort of, qualify folks. They go through a number of different qualifications based on their ARR and how many people there are, whatever it might be. And we were able to sort of expand that to different parts of our customer journey. So if someone's in the support queue and they ask us for a demo, we can do that same qualification. If somebody is talking to a growth strategist, we can understand that on a growth strategist is sort of like our CSM equivalent. We can understand that on the support team and get them assigned to the right person very quickly. And so it's sort of this idea that qualification doesn't just have to be sort of in that beginning of the journey. It sort of happens everywhere. And we've gone so far now to actually have it hooked up to Fin. And so if somebody asks Fin for a demo, it does the same workflow of seeing if they're qualified, and if they are qualified, who they should be talking to, and routing, and all of that sort of happens in one place, but is sort of spread throughout a bunch of different parts of our customer journey. So I think that's just indicative of thinking, much larger about the customer journey, as opposed to just kind of boiling it down to individual pieces at different parts and sort of siloing those different pieces.
And obviously, as you go through that, you're looking at different tasks or roles, and you're looking at how you can automate them through Fin. At what stage do you have kind of a decision point around, is it better to basically have something as a deterministic workflow versus having it as an agentic agent task? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're doing a lot of work right now, building out, procedures and things like that with Fin to sort of build those deterministic workflows. And I think that we're generally trying to give Fin as much capability as possible, obviously within reason. And so, those procedures I think really come from looking at what our humans are doing, right? And if they are sort of going through the same process of, checking into this dashboard and then checking these logs and then coming to this conclusion, whatever it might be, we want to give Fin that same capability to be able to sort of get a customer answer faster and sort of take a lot of that work away. And so there's a lot of cases where we're doing that. There's also cases where we're just giving Fin access to customer data that maybe it didn't have access to. And that's just sort of like an ambient, making Fin better kind of thing and more personalized, is it understands how many credits a customer still has. It understands when they became a customer, whatever it might be, and can sort of help inform some of its answers at baseline as well.
Very good. Like we're talking about, dissolving roles or walls falling down or convergence, and I think the place everyone goes immediately is, support and success. Love your perspective on that. Like, do you see there's a clear delineation any longer between support and success, or does it even matter whether there is a delineation or not? Like, what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that I was literally just talking to my boss, our head of CX, Jess Bergson, today about, sort of like what are the rules of engagement for different parts of the CX org, right? When we think about sort of traditionally, support was maybe this more reactive sort of place where, customers would go and you would answer their question, then you'd be done. And a CSM is sort of a relationship manager. You might have an expansion manager, whatever it might be. And I think that, we're doing a lot of collapsing. I think, the go-to-market engineer is an example of sort of collapsing almost a sales engineer and an AE into one place. Our growth strategist at Clay is sort of a CSM, but also, the onboarding manager and also the expansion and whatever it might be. And I think that, between support and success, what we're finding is that as we're sort of, taking away the, I always like to call it automating the bullshit. Like as we're taking away all that stuff and sort of creating, making it so that the questions that they are answering are more, engaging and strategic and whatever it might be, that line between where support is able to go to and where success is really starts to blur. And I think that's ultimately a good thing for the customer. I think that when we can sort of provide that right up front, if their growth strategist is on a bunch of calls all day or whatever it might be, it allows us to sort of, again, we're not thinking necessarily about what is this person's role versus this person's role and sort of passing the customer around. We're just able to sort of help them in the best way possible, which I think is the most important thing.
I love the concept, and like I have this kind of view that ultimately when a customer engages with any business, like it's one of two things. They want a question answered or they want a task completed. And really they don't care who actually does that for them. And certainly the way we're building out our strategy now with Fin is like Fin is a customer agent. It will engage with a customer anywhere in that customer journey. To your point, George, will have access to all of the data that's relevant, for that customer. So effectively, a very personalized experience can be crafted irrespective of where that customer is on the journey. And in that world, where the customer agent has that knowledge, content, personalized attributes, it should be able to answer a fair degree of the questions and complete a lot of the tasks when you think about using things like Fin procedures and data connectors on behalf of a customer. And all of a sudden, they don't have to navigate your organization around, well, is this a question for success or for the onboarding specialist or for the billing specialist or for the support org or for my AE? It's almost mind-blowing how many people you might have to think about having to talk to as a customer. And you take away all that friction, and it actually makes for a much more seamless experience from a customer point of view.
Yeah. I'm actually going to steal from my boss. What she said the other day is that where you silo those on your team, if you were to create sort of an onboarding manager, where you gain efficiency in that from a company perspective, you're actually losing in customer experience. And so yes, it may be more helpful to have a very specific onboarding manager and then a very specific expansions manager, and they have these different scopes of work. They have this different remit. But as soon as you start to do that, you lose that efficiency in the way that the customer experience happens. And I think that that's a really interesting way to sort of think about that trade-off.
Yeah, It is a really good way of thinking about it, and having this holistic view of the customer journey, I think is critical. Again, I very much feel that, might be a bit controversial, like success only emerged as a discipline because the combination of account management and support could not deliver the value the customer wanted.
Yeah.
They couldn't drive success for the customer. And ultimately, we're all about driving success for the customer. That should be the mantra. So it's interesting in this world, I think, people going forward, the humans in the organization will be valued for the skills and experience they bring to bear rather than the roles that they undertake on a traditional basis.
Yeah.
And it means that organizations can think critically around how they organize for the future. You may actually choose to organize radically differently than you did in the past, which I think is really exciting. And I think it's going to open up some really new kind of organization structures that are going to be exciting going forward and quite innovative as well.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Going to take us back now to, because you mentioned knowledge and content previously, and we had a term here, the knowledge problem. I like to think of it as the knowledge opportunity. At the end of the day, like, large language models are great, but unless they know the specifics of your business and the specifics of your customer, they're never going to give a good quality answer. And we've all been focused on constraining an AI agent to only use the data that's relevant for your business and relevant to your customers. And that's fine, if your organization is kind of expanding in a reasonably organic way, but most organizations now are beginning to expand, whether that's through customer acquisition or whether it's through shipping product at a rate that was never achievable before, again, because of AI. And all of a sudden, the pace of change is radically different. And I think in your case, I think is it 150 engineers pushing code, and you have one person managing documentation, and you have the concept of self-healing knowledge. How are you thinking about that, and how is that implemented in practice?
Yeah, so we're, I think, battling this problem like a lot of other people are, of how do we make sure. I think historically the knowledge base has always been this sort of static hub, and you get the new hire to sort of read it over and update things when they come in, and maybe it's updated every 3 months or so. And I think what became obvious actually through our sort of journey with Finn is that your knowledge base and your content is actually one of the most vital parts of your business at this point. And when I think about the sort of product documentation, I think we're really lucky with product documentation because you have a really good source of truth in the code base. The code base is literally what is happening to the product. And so one of the things that we've been working on at Clay is to sort of use that code base to validate the way that our docs are put together, right? And so we've set up a system, with using some Claude agents and things like that, where every time a support ticket is closing, we're running it through Claude Code. Claude Code has access to all of our knowledge. And it's sort of updating our docs to, based on what the customer or what Finn might have missed in that moment. And then we're validating that against the code base and having some confidence that that's correct because it's able to sort of look at the code base and know that, the limit was 50 and not 100 or whatever it might be. And what that's allowing us to do is sort of have this more rapid, high velocity update to the way that we're doing, we're updating content because like you said, if we have 150 or 200 engineers that are constantly pushing new features or updates to current features or whatever it might be, it's impossible to expect that you're sort of staying up to date with that. And so in addition to our, sort of every intercom ticket comes through and we update it, we're also looking at can we tap into, whenever an engineer is pushing new code, can we have that run through our knowledge base and update things accordingly? Can we look at, things that are happening in Slack and update that accordingly? All of these different sort of inputs can sort of feed into this agent and sort of make almost a living, breathing doc as opposed to something that's static. So we've had this going for a few weeks now, and we've made 300 plus updates to our docs, over 2 weeks, whereas we were at a cadence of maybe once a day. Our one person who's doing a heroic job, by the way, but the pace just has to be faster at this point, and so we're really excited about sort of this self-healing aspect.
I think the good news, George, is that we're building capability into the product net that will help with that.
Yeah.
And, we announced Operator a few weeks back, which has that philosophy of allowing you to work at speed, particularly identifying where you might need to make changes and actually generating those changes for you as well.
Yeah.
So a lot coming in that regard. And if you provide the right content and knowledge, obviously, Finn or an AI agent will answer as many questions as possible or complete as many tasks if you're connecting to your business systems. But there are times when you just can't complete the task or can't answer the question. And how are you looking at that kind of escalation or handoff to human as a signal, and how are you capturing that then in terms of driving continuous improvement?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, from the very beginning, whenever we implemented Fin, we always knew that one of the most important things to us is that we wanted to make that handoff process seamless. Nothing is more frustrating than wanting to talk to a human and not being able to. And so we've always kept that as a very core part of the way that we utilize Intercom or Fin. And so when we're thinking about the how we're sort of using that as signal, there's some indication. You could almost go as far to say that anytime Fin fails, there's something there for us to learn from. And maybe that's, our knowledge is not up to date. Maybe it needs access to more systems. Maybe that's just good product feedback that we want to send to the product team. And so we're really starting to use Intercom as a signal. And someone on our team at DT who's been running a lot of this Fin stuff has actually, is piping all of our Intercom conversations into a Clay table and then doing an analysis over them to understand, was there good product feedback here? Is there an opportunity to update our docs, whatever it might be, and sort of being able to, again, sort of rapidly use that customer support as a signal for every other part of the business.
And obviously, like, using AI as a customer interface, and then using your humans for the more value-add work. How are you using AI to help those humans as well? Quite apart from Fin as an AI agent talking to your customers.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that that I've been looking really closely at recently. Is I think historically I've always thought of AI and support as almost this dichotomy of like either Fin is going to answer it or it's not. And we're working a lot on this part. How can we get Fin to answer it? I think there's a really big middle ground here of this co-pilot space of how can we actually make the humans faster at the things that they're doing manually, right? And so we're starting to think, about this co-pilot experience a little bit more in, when I thought about, Intercom's co-pilot, I was always sort of the mind that that's sort of like a good thing for new folks, but eventually they'll sort of know things. And we're starting to think of it a little bit more broadly. Can you have, this co-pilot hooked up to Snowflake and hooked up to the code base and hooked up to, all of your logs, and you are almost in the same way that an engineer is just sort of asking the agent to do things for it. A support person can just ask the agent to do things for it. And so we're starting to explore, things there. I think the really difficult part is like, what is that interface? Do we just want everybody running Claude Code? Do we want to use Intercom's Copilot? There's a lot of different sort of ways to orchestrate that and set that up. But I think that the sort of core idea is where can we sort of hook, AI into all of these systems and make it faster to get at the information that you want without having to log into AWS or whatever it might be.
I love the concept you're describing, which is really kind of driving continuous improvement. And when we went on the Fin journey ourselves in customer support, like we really had this mantra, like the first time you answer a question ideally will be the last time. In that you're always challenging yourself, like what prevented Fin from either answering the question or completing the task, and just encouraging all of our support team to actually register. Was it a piece of content missing? Was it a data connector missing? And feed that into almost a continuous flywheel that we have around making improvements and making Fin better. And again, from a product perspective, part of that is built in now in terms of what we call recommendations within Fin. So again, our product team watched what our own team were doing around kind of driving continuous improvement, and then decided to build it into the product. And we've also gone down the road of thinking like, how can we improve the way that our customer support specialists or technical support specialists, technical support engineers work. And we've also embraced Claude Code quite actively, and allowing people, like particularly for more complex troubleshooting where they might have to assemble a lot of information from different data sources. Like Claude is really good at that, and we're already beginning to see some real productivity gains by exposing that to our team and allowing them to build skills that are allowing them to do deep troubleshooting. So again, like the whole way we work has just fundamentally changed, but fundamental to it is this kind of concept of continuous improvement and always think about how you can tune and make things better, which ultimately is delivering a better customer experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think the fun part about the Copilot experience too is that, your barrier for what you can give it access to is much lower, right? I would never give Fin access to our code base because I don't want it to say something that's we're not released yet or whatever it might be. Whereas I would give any one of my support specialists access to the code base, and, having them as sort of a buffer to be able to sort of filter the stuff that's coming through the AI, I think just allows us to, hook it up to Stripe, hook it up to whatever you want, because you have that sort of buffer period. So it's an exciting thing.
Yeah, and we've even gone as far as allowing some of our engineers to actually fix bugs directly.
We
categorize them, like we call them priority 3 bugs, But if the support engineer can solve it at point of registration, why not? It doesn't have to go to the engineering team. So again, think differently about convergence and roles changing, even blurring between engineering and support. But I want to talk a little bit about the humans, because we all talk about, we use the term automation, but it's really around how can you get Finn or an AI agent to complete work on your behalf. And if you have a conviction that you can deliver really good customer experience doing that, then you want to drive that automation rate as high as possible. And some people say, well, what's the goal, ultimate goal? Is 100% automation the wrong goal? Is there a category of interaction where the human will always exist and always add value? What's your kind of perspective on that?
Yeah, I think, we think about this a couple of different ways at Clay. I think, generally speaking, we're trying to get to a place where we feel really good about the customer experience as a whole, right? And one of the things that we've talked a lot about is how are our response times sort of, an indicator of that? And one of the conversations that I've had with our head of CX is being very specific about the response times that we choose, because I think that we could be thinking of how do we get that down to 0, or how do we get that down to minute response times that is sort of an indication that you're doing great. And what we found is actually that's not the model that we want to build, right? With minute response times, you're going to have a lot of folks that are sitting around because you have to have people ready at the wheel, sort of ready to chat with the next person. And we've sort of, decided that actually an hour or two is actually a response time that we feel more comfortable with, because it allows us that flexibility to work with the customers a little bit more closely. And I think that's the same case with automation. At sort of, face value, you can sort of think of yes, 100% automation rate is the goal. But being able to sort of actually think critically about that, and it's okay, yes, there's plenty of things that we want to automate, and we're not nearly where we want to be with that. But getting to 100% also isn't the ideal state. We want to figure out where that sort of happy medium is to encourage the things that we were talking about earlier of how can we make sure that they, our support specialists have more of an opportunity to engage with the customers and aren't penalized for that because they are not responding to enough conversations or whatever it might be, I think is the ultimate goal. And so we're really starting to think critically. And I think the tough part is it's always a moving target, right? We're constantly sort of driving that automation. We're constantly bringing on folks that are more technical and want to engage with customers a little bit more. And it's a little bit of a moving target. I think as you start to hit that plateau of automation, at some point you sort of have to realize, okay, there's actually this subset of questions, whether it's troubleshooting or strategic consulting or whatever it might be, are the things that you want to sort of, keep with the humans. And then with those, how can you sort of speed them up on that and sort of hit them at both sides kind of thing?
And as you've gone on this journey, how are you thinking about the trigger for Finn to hand over to a human? What are some of the kind of rules of thumb you've developed around, the guidance you need to give to Finn to do the right thing in terms of the handover? Yeah,
I think the handover, like I said earlier, it's it's really important that we keep that handover easy. I think, we're starting to find, especially with things like procedures, even if you know you're not going to solve a full problem, being able to get some of that information up front can actually help a customer. And so we're thinking about ways that we can have intentional handoffs. If someone wants a refund, we maybe don't want Finn to go through with that in some cases. And so how can I actually gather the information to then speed up, a support specialist? And so we're thinking about, the handoff in very specific ways like that of how can we make sure that we're still providing that good customer experience, but then also making it, as fast as possible as well.
And you've talked about driving automation. Maybe not 100%, but I think you said there's things you still want to automate or have Finn involved in. What's still hard from your perspective? Where is the focus at the moment, and what hasn't moved as fast as you would expect or hope?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the things that are still hard are there's a couple things. It's sort of deciding what to start automating, right? We know that there's a couple of sort of repeat things that are coming through our queue, whether it's refunds or privacy and data deletion requests or whatever it might be. And it's sometimes difficult for us to sort of prioritize those because they're all sort of things that we want to sort of engage with. I think the other part of it is, okay, we know that we want to sort of automate our privacy system. We now have to go and collaborate with lots of different people around the organization, whether it's the legal team or the marketing team or the engineering team to get access to the APIs or whatever it might be. And that process, I think, is still difficult. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is we've just sort of promoted somebody into the role who's got a little bit more of a computer science background, and she's sort of able to take a lot of this on on as well. And I think that's back to exactly what you were saying of you start to have engineers actually sitting under the support org who are sort of in charge of getting us access to these things and building out the APIs and connecting the data and all that kind of stuff. Again, that technical bar just becomes much higher, and being able to sort of have that all happening within the support org, I think, is really important.
Yeah, no, I love that concept of being able to solve the problems that are preventing, in that case, getting data access and getting the right kind of information available to complete the task for the customer. Just going back to the automation piece, I have set a target for the team. Like, we have this project called Path to 95. So I've set 95% automation, and we're currently at 84% this week. So we have driven it quite hard already. But again, it's on the conviction that we can deliver a better customer experience. But the reason I made it 95 was similar to what you're saying. I still believe there are some activities that you will always want a human involved, and you will always want to get them involved as quickly as possible in those activities. Is 95% the right figure? I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm pretty impressed we've already gotten, because we put this in place when we were at 80%, we've already gotten to 84% pretty quickly. And we're still delivering really good customer experience. You've got to be able to measure that customer experience and know that you are actually delivering well for the customers. But we did an interesting thing. We analysed the gap between where we were and where we needed to be. We actually did the analysis gap to 100%. And basically, 50% could be solved by having data connectors and access to underlying business systems. There was still about 18% that was down to content, which was kind of a little bit of a surprise, but there's always kind of edge case conditions on content that this analysis surfaced for us. And then there was 32% that I kind of classify as a long tail of different edge case conditions, some of which it may never be worth putting the effort into automating them. Or you don't want to automate them because really you want a human involved. So it's interesting to go through that exercise and stratify exactly where that gap was and what we might be able to focus on as low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things there too is that I think that the customer base is sort of changing in that respect too. I think that historically we used to always get the person who came into the queue and the first thing they would type is "I want to talk to a human" kind of thing. And as you sort of show the customer that there are actually more capabilities, that it actually has more information, that it can take more actions, you start to train that customer into, oh, actually maybe I can do this without talking to a human. And one of the things that's really interesting is that when we think about the quality of our support, a really big indicator of that is obviously how quickly you get a response, right? It's not just how good that response was, it's how quickly you get that. And if you're getting that instantaneously, that's obviously going to be a better customer experience. And so I find myself doing that even in my day-to-day when I'm talking to an airline. I'm sort of testing the capabilities of, can it actually book my seat? I don't know, maybe it can now. So I think that it's sort of this, you get more returns as you make it even better.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love if the airlines would take my international credit card.
They're not quite there yet, but
that's a different a different challenge. Again, focusing a little bit on the human dimension. One thing that we have been very focused on is how can we add more value when a human is involved with our customers. And I mentioned earlier, we have this concept of consultative support where you're giving your team the latitude and the autonomy to go beyond the issue that the customer is presented with and think about, well, how can I add most value to this customer, using this part of the product more deeply or using it in a way that they're going to avoid the next bottleneck. And I think being able to think about that consultative approach again means that there are going to be logical handoff points where you want to hand off to your humans so they can bring that value to bear to your customers. Now, ultimately, we want to build some of that into Fin as well and get Fin to add that value as well. But certainly, there's, as far as I'm concerned, a role for humans for the foreseeable future. They're adding huge value, and all Fin is doing is actually allowing them the autonomy and the bandwidth to actually do that for customers, which is really exciting actually. Yeah. It changes the role of support as well. I think people feel it's far more fulfilling role than it was in the past.
Yeah, one of the things that we're thinking about related to that is we've historically not given our tier 1 or enterprise customers access to Fin. We just want to, it's a little bit more of a white glove experience, and we didn't have as much confidence in our Fin experience to sort of be able to help them. But one of the things that we're seeing is that there's plenty of things that are coming through our tier 1 queue that are very basic questions that Finn could be answering, and not just basic ones, but questions that Finn should be and can be answering. But the sort of result right now is that they might be waiting, an hour or something for a response. And so one of the things that we're starting to do too is segment that question up front and be able to say, if this is a how-to question that is in our knowledge base or something along those lines, then send Finn after it, and sort of be able to build in that experience a little bit more intentionally, so that we can, again, it's not necessarily a handoff at that point, but being able to sort of decide what is Finn doing and what is Finn not doing, and making sure that, especially at that enterprise level, you're giving them access where it makes sense, and then having them wait for a human when it doesn't.
Yeah, we did something similar. We held off exposing Finn to our premier support customers, which is a kind of paid support layer. But then over time, we have introduced it and given the customer the option to get Finn to answer the question if it makes sense. And very often it does.
Yeah.
Now, I hope you brought your crystal ball, George, because this is the part where we talk about where next. And if you look out, and I hate to put time frames, some people say 2 to 3 years. We've actually net on 18 months, and even that's ambitious.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you think will look different in 18 months' time when you think about this connected customer experience, using AI to really manage the entire customer lifecycle and journey?
Yeah, assuming we're all still here. I think in 18, I think one of the things that I'm starting to see that is going to become even more of a thing, I'm seeing this specifically with the content, is your customer is actually changing in what a customer is, right? And I think the sort of very acute example of that is that we're starting to update our documentation. And right now, that whole self-healing knowledge base I have is actually just sitting in a GitHub repo. And our brand team is really upset about it because it looks really bad and it's not a very pretty thing. But I'm actually not writing that content for human consumption necessarily, other than through an agent. And so I think that that's going to continue to expand, and who you are supporting, maybe humans right now, but could be agents depending on what your product is. Your API could be changing the way that people are interacting with your product. The MCP, is sort of an example of that. And I think that making sure that you're sort of building your support to do both of those things, I think is going to become probably more important as time goes on, as people start interacting through agents. Who that actual customer is going to change as well. So starting to see it now, I think it'll continue.
I think one thing for me that I hope will be different in 18 months is I think you will have an agent layer that has actually got really long-term memory around the customer journey, and you can set goals for that customer within the agent, and it is constantly working to achieve those goals with the customer. And I think that for me is where you're adding the ultimate value from an AI agent layer. And I think the technology is evolving. It's our vision for Finn as a customer agent. Like, we wanted to have that long-term memory. We wanted to be able to be goal-oriented in terms of the interactions with customers, rather than being transaction-oriented, which is the way a lot of the Finn interactions are today. They're transaction-based. So that's, I really believe that will build out. But another thing that I think will be different, and I'm not sure how we're going to actually manage this, like, your customer at the end of the day might be another agent and not a human.
Right.
Again, I think we've all assumed for a long time that the person at the other end of this interaction is a human, but over time the person or the entity at the other end will be an agent itself. Yeah. So agent kind of communication and interaction, I think, is going to be different in 18 months. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to net out yet. That's going to be an interesting place for us to be. For sure. An infinite loop of one agent trying to stay in contact with another agent. So that's going to be interesting. Now, looking backwards a little bit, and again, for maybe people who aren't as far advanced on that journey with AI, as maybe an organization like Clay, what do you wish someone had told you 2 years ago that would make life easier now? Yeah,
I think probably to just start earlier. I think that, what is it? The best time to start was like 2 months ago, and the second best time is right now. I think that, Katie, who is one of the managers of my team, she really started to take this sort of Finn stuff over like 6 months ago now, I guess. And we have made such huge gains over the past, 4 or 5 months that we're super excited about. But we've been using Finn for 1.5 years, right? And I think that all of that stuff that we've been thinking thinking about content and about how we think about these procedures and what we're giving it access to. I just wish we had started it earlier, because I think that the more you do, the more you sort of figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I'm really sort of pushing my team sort of across the board, not just on Fin, but just keep doing things, because you don't realize what is working and what is not working unless you're sort of in that iteration process. And I think it's so easy nowadays to sort of get in this paralyzed state of like, it's changing. Anything I build today is going to be irrelevant tomorrow, whatever it might be. But the more you sort of just start something and go into Claude Code and just try the thing that you've been thinking about, because I think that that's just that rapid iteration is going to be an adaptation is going to be what sort of makes it good in 6 months from now.
Yeah, I think when I look back and I think what would I like to have known 2 years ago, I'd love to have known how fast things were going to progress. And knowing that, I probably would have moved faster. At the time, I thought we were moving pretty fast, but then when you kind of look back historically, you think, yeah, we probably could have moved faster if we'd really understood how this technology was evolving, the capability was going to be available to us, the complexity that an AI agent could handle over time. So I think just weren't thinking big enough, I think is probably the way I describe it. Because it was a little bit of an unknown. So I'd love to have known back then exactly how fast this technology was going to advance. George, we're about to kind of segue to Q&A with our kind of friends here tonight. So that's my cue to make sure that the roving mics are coming out to let people ask questions. And before we finish up, love for any questions from the floor for George or for myself, or any comments you have. So you put up your hand, we have roving mics, and hopefully someone will get a mic to you.
I'm pretty fascinated by the constantly evolving documentation piece that you talked about. How much of that would you guess is maybe the coverage of that? Do you feel like in general, with all of the updates that those 150 engineers are pushing out, do you feel like it's doing a pretty good job of keeping most of that updated, and maybe speaking to the accuracy piece too? I'd be curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I'd say it's doing an okay job. I think the biggest bottleneck right now is just me. We're doing a little bit of sort of automatically merging changes in if it has high confidence in that based on a couple of criteria versus manual review. Candidly, my actual product knowledge of Clay has diminished as I've been further away from the product. And so a lot of that stuff I'm sort of looking at and I'm like, sure, that sounds right. And it, checked against code base. And so it's probably there. I think the reality is we're sort of I think pretty early on in the sort of iterative process of it. And my hope is that it's just always becoming better and will eventually just be, sort of that coverage will be, better and better. Will it ever have 100% coverage? Probably not. I don't think what we're not doing is sort of taking our entire code base and giving it to an agent and saying, make sure everything's documented, because I don't think that would be very successful. So I think it's almost speaking towards what Declan said of just if something has been missed once, we don't want to miss it a second time kind of thing. And there's some hope that it will just continue to get better.
Hi, my name is Zishan Jaffrey. I'm the head of GTM at a Y Combinator startup called Trident. And it's awesome to see that you have adopted agents in a huge way, both of these companies, Fin and Clay. I wanted to ask you, how do you address the new attack vector that AI agents introduce? I don't know if you saw, but Meta, they released their AI. Now they're giving out accounts all over the place by resetting one-time passcodes through prompt injection attacks. So how are you addressing those security concerns?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we're sort of in it right now. I think one of the things that we've been thinking about our IT team specifically is how can we sort of centralize the agent access piece of one of the hardest parts for anyone at our company right now of building with AI is getting it access to Salesforce or Snowflake or Intercom or whatever it might be, because those folks are maybe not as technical and don't want to hook up the MCP or whatever it might be. And we're starting to think about how can we sort of centralize that data access piece, not only to democratize it across everybody at the company, but also make sure it's done in a very secure way. Have we done a good job at that right now? Probably not. And I think a lot of people are just sort of using it. But I think it's definitely a risk that we're starting to think about a little bit more actively.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything is, you can never be 100% assured that you're fully secure in any technology platform. It's just, that's been the history of technology over the last 40 years and why there's a whole cybersecurity or industry has developed over time. We obviously build Fin. I would have to say the AI team and the security team at Fin are two of the most paranoid teams I've ever worked with around security and around trying to ensure the robustness of the agent environment, trying to anticipate what type of attack vectors are evolving, how we can build in capability within the agents to guard against that. So as has been the case for the last 40 years I've been in tech, it's a battle. Can you outwit the people who are trying to be smarter and compromise systems and compromise new technology? There's no guarantee, but I think a level of paranoia is really, really critical, particularly if you're using things like an agent for completing tasks. Some people don't understand that you've already put guardrails in place for your humans who are accessing those systems. And you need to make sure that at a minimum you're putting in the same guardrails for an agent, and you probably want some more guardrails because the blast radius of an AI agent doing something would be slightly more than humans doing something. But you got to just have the same level of paranoia. If you have paranoia around your humans accessing your systems, just be as paranoid about an AI agent accessing your systems, and make sure you're only exposing the attributes that actually are required to complete the task, and that you're using whatever controls you would normally use anyway. So the good discipline that you've built up over the years should just apply for an AI agent as well. Maybe with a little bit more paranoia, just as I say, because the blast radius is potentially a little bit more damaging. Yeah.
The guy with the hat. Hey, George.
So
thanks for putting this together. I'm pretty heavy user actually of Fin because I write a lot to the Clay support. And what I want to say is I also see the journey and the development, which is really cool, going in the right direction. My question is, with all things AI, right? Fin was an impossible product before LLMs. And what I'm wondering is, and I guess everybody runs into this with AI, where do you draw the line of when your customer doesn't put in good context or content, as you refer to it? Fin will technically work, but it will not help. So where do you say, hey guys, you're off to your own devices, or is there a lot of enablement happening? How to structure content? Do you take, I guess Clay is probably more on the AI build side of companies implementing that, but not everybody will be that. So how do you make your customers successful with AI, where so much depends purely on the customer and not on the technical capabilities? Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Andreas. Thank you. I think he slacked me the other day and said he's going to give me a really hard question. So here we are. I think the thing that I think about is a little bit of it is just happening naturally, sort of like what I said earlier, is that the people are just sort of figuring out how to interact with agents just more generally, and that's not just in the tech world. That's just consumers in general. And so I think that will just continue to happen more and more, just in the same way that most people figured out how to Google something before it was new. I think the other thing that I think a lot about with this is we always want to make sure that we're keeping that customer experience at the forefront. And one of the conversations that I've had with my team before is it would be much easier if we asked everybody who was contacting to support to fill out a form of some predetermined things. What part of the product are you having an issue with? What's the specific error message that you're seeing? Whatever it might be. But that's just kind of a bad customer experience, because every time you want to talk to somebody, you have to fill out that form. And so we've sort of taken on the sort of the hit there, the trade-off that, yeah, we might not get the information that we want right up front, but we also don't want to make it, we want to reduce the friction to contacting support and making sure that it's not difficult. And so the thing that we try to do is make sure that we're keeping that customer experience up front, and again, using procedures and AI to sort of see if we can ask those questions with AI beforehand, like what is your table link or whatever it might be, so that we have them sort of, through the rest of the conversation.
So yeah, it's a really good question, and it is a struggle. So several dimensions to it. So the first dimension is, what George said, getting people to interact with an AI agent or Fin in the right way. So when we first launched Fin, we discovered that customers were treating it like an old chatbot. So we'd try and give keywords or a very kind of succinct description of what they were doing, which ultimately didn't allow the underlying large language model to function as well as it might do. So it took actually longer to get the answer. So we just prompted our customers to actually describe the problem they were having. And once we did that, ultimately their problem was getting resolved faster. And we actually saw a 5% increase in CSAT literally overnight when we changed the prompts. That's one way of getting people to prompt correctly. The other way is, and again, we've built in capability within Fin. It can ask clarifying questions. So if the problem hasn't been presented in a way that's very clear to Fin, Fin will iterate a number of times asking clarifying questions. Obviously, it will reach a stage where it will hand over to a human because it's just not getting to the root cause of the issue. And that has definitely helped improve as well, where Fin is asking the right questions at the right time, and customers are beginning to explain a little bit more. I have a conviction, and we're not quite here yet, but even if the customer isn't explaining very well what the problem is, if you can understand exactly what they were doing on your platform prior to asking the question, you have insights into exactly where the problem was that they encountered. And getting those type of signals from an underlying system, like there are products beginning to emerge that will do that for you. And if you can then build that context into Fin, then Fin can use that information to infer exactly what the customer was trying to do, even if the customer is not describing that in a very clear way for Fin. So I think the next evolution is really picking up those real-time signals around exactly where the customer is interacting with your product and service, what they were trying to do, when they initiated the support interaction. And that's probably 9 times out of 10 the right area to focus on.
Yeah, I think that just to add on to that, the other sort of interesting part is the other side of the conversation of once you've actually solved their question, can you infer from the product if you actually solved their question in the right way? So in the case where somebody asks Fin a question, Fin responds, and then nothing else happens, it's really hard right now to actually know if we solved their question or if they just gave up. And being able to hook into the product that way helps on the other side of the conversation to determine success as well, which is kind of fun.
Hi. So I guess one question around the go-to-market engineer discussion. So how are you thinking about hiring right now in terms of like finding people who are engineers or have engineering background who are also able to talk to customers like with empathy and vice versa, more people-oriented people, and how do you think about the composition of those teams and even like managing expectations as these roles collapse? So that's generally it.
Yeah, it's a great question. Specifically on support, we actually haven't changed our hiring process that much since the beginning, because we've always sort of been of the mind that we wanted to hire really good people onto our support team, and oftentimes that meant really technical. And of course, we've always kept a very high bar for how well you can talk to a customer as well. And so I think the thing that is changing probably the most is how we evaluate that. We knew we wanted to evaluate that, but we're changing the way we sort of, yes, we want you to sort of navigate through a clay table, but how are you sort of thinking about troubleshooting within that sort of call that you're having, and what sort of things are you thinking about? Are you thinking almost like an engineer in the way that you think about like, oh, I tried this and it didn't work, so I'm going to try this next step and then I'm going to debug from there, or whatever it might be. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're starting to try to just do more of, is make sure that we're keeping that bar very high for technicality and all that kinds of stuff.
We have made some changes in how we hire. It was a time when we almost valued the relationship skills over the technical skills, in that we could bring people up to speed in the product pretty quickly. Now we're discovering that obviously the stuff coming through to our humans is far more complex, far more nuanced. So we actually do need people who have strong technical background. We still need the relationship skills, and that can sometimes be hard to get the two married, but that's what we aspire to now from a hiring point of view. Yeah. So we changed our job profiles within the support organization, changed our hiring process.
Yeah. I'll also say, actually, we don't outsource any of our support either. So I think that's probably a big shift that's happening in the industry, is that there's some indication that things that you were, historically outsourcing to are probably things that you can get AI to do now. Yeah. And so it reduces that need.
I think we've time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah.
I have a rather. Is that?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Oh. All right. I guess you'll be next. Well, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you both.
You're next.
Probably a little bit more for Declan, although George, you mentioned something as well. Declan, you're referencing that you're going from 84 to 95% automation, right? And George, you're referencing that I think like FCR AHT as like the metrics of quality, right? May not hold anymore. I'm curious, Declan, how do you know like what's that 95% is good, not just high?
So from our point of view, like from very early on this journey, like I had this really strong conviction that I wanted to be able to measure every single customer interaction and assign what we call a customer experience score to it. And I didn't want to rely just on CSAT or any other measure like NPS or customer effort score, because they tend to be survey based. You don't get a huge response to them, and they're not giving you a full lens on the experience you're delivering to your customers. So internally within the support team in Fin, we built our internal version of customer experience score. So for every single interaction, we could determine, had we delivered to the standard that we have set for that particular interaction? And we then worked with the product team to build it into the product. So customer experience score is part of the standard Fin product now. Or sorry, it's called Pro. It's kind of an add-on for Fin, but it gives you a customer experience score. And then we've done a further iteration on that, and it's a thing called monitors. Now monitors, you can use it for quality assurance, but you can also use it to develop your own custom customer experience score. Because we dictate customer experience score in the product. So if you're using our standard customer experience score, you can't change the attributes and you can't change the weighting. And that allows us to do benchmarking across customers, which some customers value that benchmark information. But with monitors, you can actually build a custom customer experience score. So you decide the attributes, you decide the weighting. You could have a different scorecard for different customer segments. You could have a different scorecard for different products. You might have a specialized scorecard for when you launch a product, because you might want to go deeper in terms of that customer experience. So being able to measure every single customer interaction and design a set of attributes and weights that are important for you, that's how we know, whether, and I'll use Des Traynor again, like he said, when you've gone too far, right? And you will have begun to damage the customer experience. And once we see that, we know we've gone too far.
Yeah.
But we're paranoid about measuring it. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that the with the customer experience score that Intercom has, they also give you these reasons, which have been really helpful for us, because I think oftentimes if someone has a bad experience, it's actually not support's fault. It might be that we didn't offer a product thing that they wanted or whatever it might be, and so being able to look at those reasons also helps us sort of like delineate that feedback between what can we make better as opposed to what can we feed to the product team or something along those lines.
And I think this will have to be our last question.
Okay. Yeah, it's working now. I have a bit of a pointed how-to question. So in my organization, the customer team is sales, success, and support. And that's across tiers, so tier 1 right the way through to tier 3. So our customers have one person that they know to email, regardless of what user you are. Our challenge now is, how do you start that triaging to Fin to provide that support in that experience when they are emailing directly? Is there a way that you've implemented it which is accessible, starting off with tier 1? How does that workflow or that experience look from a customer perspective?
Yeah, so I think I would say that the first thing you have to sort of figure out is what are the things that Fin is good at answering, as opposed to what is that Fin is not good at answering, right? So it may be if it's sort of this tier 1 type thing where someone doesn't want to just has a how-to kind of question, you can sort of categorize that up front using, I think they're Fin attributes now. Yeah. You can categorize that up front and then determine what happens in your workflow based on what that sort of like AI categorization was. So the very specific way that we do it is we've built out a flow where if it is more of a how-to question, and again, it uses AI to sort of categorize it as how-to or bug or strategic or whatever that might be, you can sort of write in prompts for each attribute. And based on what happens there, then you sort of either send Fin after it or just send it straight to a human or whatever it might be. But it really starts with like identifying what those sort of classifiers are of what you feel confident Fin would be able to answer.
Yeah, and to add that, you can actually deploy Fin on email as well. So it doesn't require the messenger interface. You can deploy on email. So you can actually do that characterization on the email and decide, actually, this is something Fin can handle and Fin can do it, or no, this is something Fin can't handle. I go straight to a human.
And that can be quite transparent.
Yeah. You can make it very transparent, and that's one thing about like an AI agent. You should make it transparent. Like a customer should know they're talking to an AI agent and not a human.
Yeah, we took a while to add email into the mix because it's a little bit of a weirder experience. You sort of expect it over Messenger, but not email. But we found it's actually it's been pretty positive for us because again, it gets them that answer much quicker than it would otherwise.
We've kind of come to the end of this part of the evening, but we do invite you to stay a little bit longer with us for some drinks and networking. Prior to that, though, we're going to put a QR code up here, right behind me, right on cue. We would love if you would scan the code and give us some feedback on this event. We're all the time trying to iterate these events and understand how we can add most value to people who come and attend. So your feedback is really important to us to make sure that we can, the next time out, improve on things and hopefully make whatever changes are necessary to make this a more fulfilling evening for each of you. Again, just want to really thank you for taking the time to spend with us this evening. George, a huge thank you to you for the insights that you provided, because I think Clay has been at the forefront of this kind of connected customer experience and scaling, CX with AI. I love every conversation we have because I learn so much. You give me lots of good ideas of things that I can bring back to my organization as well. So I very much feel we have a really strong partnership in that regard. So thank you for sharing this stage here tonight.
Of course.
We really appreciate the insights. And with that, I say enjoy the rest of the evening. We're around here for any questions that you have for the next while. There's some drinks and food, etc. So please do stay with us if you can. If there's a question you didn't get to ask, just find us. We'll answer it as best we can. And with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
George,
Thank you. Appreciate it.